Look, it must be demoralising to many decent Australians to hear the kerfuffle and indeed humbug about the crisis, and yes, it is a crisis, in Alice Springs. Why demoralising and why is it humbug? Bordering on hypocrisy? Well, for years I have spoken to Jacinta Price, now an outstanding senator. She and I have talked on air on various platforms about the crisis in the Northern Territory. Jacinta, with first-hand experience of the crisis, has been ignored for years, as has her mother, Bess Price, both very well educated, both with extraordinary experience in education, training and public administration, both significant Indigenous figures. Bess Price, when elected to the Northern Territory Parliament in 2012, gained a swing of 18%. Such was her standing in the community. Jacinta's mother, Bess, was nominated in 2012 for the US International Women of Courage Award. Now, I only say this because both Jacinta and her mother have articulated the Alice Springs Northern Territory problem for years. Their voice has been ignored. Indeed, Jacinta Price, Senator Jacinta Price, is a metaphor of the violence problem. When she stood for the federal parliament at the 2019 election for the lower house, the Greens candidate posted a picture of Jacinta drinking from a coconut with a caption, "It is not every day you see a coconut drinking from a coconut." That didn't inspire any headlines or indeed punishment, because I suppose Jacinta was standing for the Liberal Party. Proof that in politics the enemy is often within. One Indigenous tribal leader said of Jacinta Price, then the Deputy Mayor of Alice Springs, quote, "How about you effing die a painful death, you sellout coconut? You need to be eradicated like the disease you are." Another told her to, quote, "F off and die." Another said, "You need a spearing and a shooting." You see, she was a Liberal candidate, not a headline or a punishment for any of that verbal violence and intimidation. Another said, "If I see you anywhere around Alice Springs, I'm going to F the F out of you, you see." Jacinta Price's crime is to make, for many years, powerful speeches on how to fix Aboriginal poverty and violence towards Aboriginal women. She has been ignored. Yet now they're talking about a voice to the Parliament, which I will look at tomorrow. We have such a voice. It's powerful. It's informed. It's been ignored. Suddenly the Labor Party and the Prime Minister have woken up to the issue of violence in the Northern Territory. As you can see from the comments I've just cited, it's violence from Aboriginal Australians to Aboriginal Australians. Jacinta Price must be wondering what is new. In 2020, Jacinta went to Canberra with a video revealing appalling violence, highlighting that in one of the communities, 184 children were victims of abuse. 35 men were facing 300 charges and a further 124 were suspects. She was called a race traitor. She went to Canberra, joined by the cousins of a 15-year-old Layla Leering who had been raped and died. The three Aboriginal women, including the 15-year-old softly spoken cousin, were trying to get the then federal government, federal parliament, to address girls being raped and beaten in the Northern Territory years ago. The media were nowhere to be found, preoccupied with Brittany Higgins. And you might remember the story about men in the parliament pleasuring themselves. Indeed, at the time, there were women marching and spitting and hissing about equality. Not a single Green attended Jacinta Price. Not a member of the Labor Party were interested in Jacinta or the plight of raped girls. Jacinta Price was only 12 when she lay all night with her baby cousin after her parents had rescued the 1.5-year-old boy from alcohol-fueled violence. Jacinta put the little boy to sleep next to her. The toddler's father, a man Jacinta loved deeply, died from excessive alcohol consumption. Only now, since Jacinta made it known that in the first sitting week of the new parliamentary year, this week, she would present a bill that would restore sweeping alcohol bans to Alice Springs and its surrounding communities. Her bill would force grog bans in communities until they developed alcohol management plans. The Prime Minister has now been mugged by political reality over a crisis that Jacinta has talked about for years. Now the Prime Minister has been forced to endorse alcohol bans that he refused to adopt last year, that he has opposed since, despite evidence and pleas from people on the ground. Senator Jacinta Price joins me in very disturbing circumstances. Jacinta, thank you for your time. It is no comfort to you to know that you've talked about this problem for years. Is anything the federal government is now doing likely to adequately address the problem?
Oh, look, they like to think that they're going to adequately address the problem. Announcing $250 million Band-Aid interim solutions is not the answer to this situation. And basically handballing all that responsibility back over to the Northern Territory government, who have consistently failed, who have consistently chose not to listen to vulnerable community members, Aboriginal organisations calling for the reinstatement of these measures. And pretty much the Chief Minister, up until yesterday, was calling those alcohol restrictions racist, race-based policy that she completely and utterly disagreed with. And now she's had to backflip despite all of that. But you know, Albanese, he's not interested in really solving this issue. You know, here's $250 million, go do with it what you please, and go and reinstate those restrictions on your own watch. And I'm going to go back to the tennis, basically.